begin by looking at the genesis of our involvement in urban rainwater harvesting issues, particularly those concerning the civic engagement with the GCC, and dealing with and getting very closely involved with various resident welfare associations, and how we initially began, by just blindly opposing stormwater drain in the initial days, and then how we gradually moved on to suggesting various methods of rainwater harvesting on the roads, and how we actually and how Rain Center actually implemented it. And we also had to, over a period of time, provide real alternative solutions. We cannot just we found that just opposing stormwater drains without really providing an alternative to the problem of flooding when it occurs, doesn't really work. And therefore, we had to really work towards not only providing a solution, but also interacting very closely with the GCC organization, the stormwater drain department in the Amma Malige in Ripon buildings, behind the Ripon building. And there we really had to answer a lot of, take to them the schematic of what we are proposing, and explain to them and answer questions and so on. And there were a lot of challenges in doing so, and really using the GCC's online complaint mechanism, how to really raise issues, how to really bring together informed residents of various resident welfare associations, work closely with them. So it was a very interesting journey of learning with all its turns and twists and so on. So let me just begin by talking about the genesis of how we got involved. So typically, being associated with Mr. Shekhar Raghun for about 2 decades, and in general having a passion for water conservation, and more specifically rainwater harvesting, way back in 2012 2013 time periods, we said whenever we see some digging happening, whenever we see a stormwater drain construction happening, I used to get very agitated and used to have discussions with Mr. Shekhar. And then he would talk to me about his work, from late 90s, early 2000s in the Besanagar area, interacting and really bringing up this issue, and his interaction with some of the top officials, who are commissioners of corporation or the mass secretary and so on. So taking his guidance on, essentially this, and looking at, what are our points of view with regard to why are we opposing stormwater drain. And, we used to just submit petitions saying that, rainwater has to be conserved. You cannot drain rainwater. This is a city that is, that has its own challenges with regard to water. And we have copious rain, and there is no way you should drain water, because by 2002 we had this rainwater harvesting law which requires residents to do rainwater harvesting. So we said, if you are expecting residents to harvest rainwater and make it compulsory as part of the building construction process and so on, then what prevents you, the corporation, from actually saving rainwater on the roads? For us, being enthusiasts of water conservation, we said this is how you should be looking at things, and that is how we initially started lobbying with corporation. At that time, Saidai Doraiswamy, he was the mayor, and he was fairly receptive, I should say. Whenever we called up or we went there physically, he would actually respond very quickly, and then call up the concerned, the zone. And the executive engineer would immediately call up and say, "Sir, did you go and meet with the mayor? What is your problem? How can we solve it?" And this and then. At least, there was some kind of a response to our request to consider, conservation of water on the roads. So that is how it began. And then slowly there was this resident welfare association called RAPRA, um, Arepuram Residents Welfare Association. So they contacted us, and Mr. Shekhar put me in touch with them. And we started looking at, we started typing out these typical petitions of, why water should be conserved. And we were opposing stormwater drains once again. And we began by doing, recharge wells on the road, initially with RAPRA, the Arepuram Residents Welfare Association. And slowly, with that experience of suggesting, of opposing the stormwater drains, and then actually doing some recharge wells on the roads and so on, we expanded to other resident welfare associations. Whenever we saw stormwater drain work happening, we used to contact the key people in various resident welfare associations, the presidents, secretaries, and people who are very actively involved in civic issues, people like Jayanti, who's on this call, people like Bala. So we started engaging with them, and then we said, here is a solution. We don't have to blindly oppose stormwater drains without actually proposing an alternative. And we have done this in Arepuram, and we have done this in a few areas here and there. And therefore, we started expanding this approach to several other localities in the city. And, in that process, initially we began with as I said, with a very painful process of typing out letters and sending it. We started utilizing this forum of online complaint. Normally, a typical online complaint is used to say, here is a street light that doesn't function, or a road that needs to be relayed, or people requesting for a stormwater drain to be constructed, and so on. So normally, these are, the typical usages of the online complaint mechanism that people are generally familiar with. And so we started using this to raise the online complaint mechanism to the next level, to really start saying, we don't want it, rather than saying we want something. Here is a new stormwater drain that is required. That is a typical complaint that corporation likes to receive, because that also gives work for the stormwater drain department, and then they, the whole machinery, kicks in. But here we are, trying to say that based on our experience and based on the fact that we've been able to put some recharge wells on the roads, and we have really seen the recharge wells, handling and taking care of the flooding in localized flooding, as well as flooding on significant portions of the road. We had some success stories and some experience, and therefore we looked at a very innovative and very different approach to utilizing the online complaint mechanism. And we found that there was an opportunity for a dialogue almost. We could go back and forth. We could say, here is our viewpoint, and we would closely watch the complaint and how they react to it. And then if we find that they're not actually responding the way we want, we would reopen the complaint. If they try to quickly close the complaint, we would reopen it, and then we would make sure that, the kind of action that was initially expected out of them, we would pretty much use it as a mechanism to drive them towards that.